Okay, we're into an episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff to have a really special segment for you guys today from the brand Omega. A little about them. They were founded back in 1848. They're Swiss made and they're part of the Swatch Group within their luxury tier. Although Omega and Tissot merging was a precursor to what would eventually be known as the Swatch Group, so I would say their history is a touch more pure than some of the other brands within the group where they pretty much just kind of rescued them. Now, in terms of the type of watch, this is a chronograph, some key characteristics inside when you're looking for a chrono. Of course, you're going to see some external pushers to activate timing functions. You're going to have multiple subdials to measure elapsed time, often featuring additional scales dependent on that subgenre. This is the Omega Speedmaster Broad Arrow Automatic 3551.50, and it's a lesser known handsome automatic Speedmaster from the early 2000s that was essentially a mashup of the 1957 Speedy and the popular Moonwatch Professional, powered by an infamous movement based on the high horology Frederic Piguet 1285, which was an updated version of the 1185. And you know, variants of that movement were used by the likes of AP, Breguet, Blancpain, Vacheron Constantin, and many more. So that was really valued for its vertical clutch and column wheel mechanisms. This movement did go through some growing pains early on over its life cycle, which did tarnish kind of the reputation of these watches early on. One of the nice things is, though, that early on in these watches' life cycle was a long time ago compared to where we are today in 2024. I was able to source this right through Belmont Watches in San Diego, but these can typically be found within the $3,000 to $5,000 range, depending on condition, location, and the completeness in the package. So yeah, this is the Speedmaster that kind of got me to finally pull the trigger on a Speedmaster, because it is very special. I love the aesthetic. It just combines so many things that I really enjoy and have enjoyed about the Speedmaster line for many years. But finally, to see them all kind of come together, and of course, I do have it paired to an aftermarket Forstner flat link contemporary bracelet, and it just looks the business. So with that long intro out of the way, let's go ahead, zoom the camera out, get this piece in hand, and take a closer look. Okay, guys, now I normally don't have the gloves on, but I had to bust them out here just because there's so many polished surfaces on this watch, and for me to handle it and manipulate it in front of the camera, of course, I would be getting fingerprints all over this baby. But I will say, in wearing experience, I'm not touching the watch, so it's definitely much less of an issue if you're wearing it versus reviewing it. Now, one thing I did want to make sure to showcase here is going to be that dial, because every kind of piece of media that I've seen on this piece kind of has the dial looking just like a plain black dial. But as you guys can see here, there's actually a bit of sunray. It's very, very slight and very, very subtle. So it doesn't stand out super bad, which I think is good. But I did want to show that here there's, again, that subtle sunburst pattern there. So this isn't just matte black, and it's definitely not glossy. But I will say, depending on the way it reflects and the way you're looking at it, a lot of times it might just appear almost like a kind of low gloss black, but it's really just a satin sunray. So very, very cool. Obviously, I love the broad arrow handset here. I think it's very well balanced. I like the integrated date there at 6 o'clock. Really fantastic applied indices, guys. Applied Omega logo, automatic chronometer in terms of the text. And I also like that with that steel bezel there, it does shrink the dial down a bit. And for many of you who might not have hands-on experience with an Omega Speedmaster, one of the things that make this professional case so wearable is, even though it's 42 millimeters, it's only 42 because of this asymmetrical case side. If you look at this straight on, the case stops short of the bezel on this side, but doesn't on this side. It's because it's actually elongated out on this side to provide you with a shear guard for the pushers as well as crown guards. So that is a very nice feature, and I think it's something that, when you're just looking at ultimate specs and dimensions, a lot of people really miss out on. So that's why if you were to, let's say, measure across the bezel, this is only 39.5 millimeters at the bezel, and then this dial itself, while the bezel is still relatively thin, it's not a dive bezel or anything like that, the dial, of course, is a chronograph dial, so it has the 3 sub-registers, it has, of course, the outer tracks and everything, so there's a lot going on, there's a lot of balance, but there's a lot of breadth to this dial. It's not overly crowded, and that's one of the nice features, but it's also not vast and empty feeling, and it's just really, really nice. You can see, the 3 sub dials here, and then with the logo and the writing there at the top, it just fills each quadrant really, really beautifully, and I think in a really balanced way. So I dig that just a whole lot, right? So 42 millimeters in diameter, again with that asymmetrical case side there that provides the guards, 14 millimeters thick there, so quite nice, especially considering this is a mechanical chronograph, and it does have a nice box domed sapphire. It's not as highly domed as the Hesalite would be, but it is also quite, that helps with the thinness as well. So that's really, really nice. And man, look at that profile. Absolutely gorgeous. Lug to lug, 47.8 millimeters, all stainless steel in a brushed with high polished bevel layout. And these lines are so organic and also so iconic. I just really, really dig that. And one of the nice things is paired to this beautiful Forstner flat link bracelet. It's their contemporary flat link, and it is the post 2021 end link. So if you're going to buy your own for your own watch, that is something to just keep in mind. And I know this is pre 2021 watch, but the post 2021 end link is actually more versatile per the folks at Forstner themselves. So big shout out to Forstner, because this is just, honestly, it makes the watch. Without this option, I might have never wanted to pull the trigger on this, but because of this, because of that female end link, it just really accentuates these curves on these lugs. My goodness, look at that. And it's nice because it doesn't elongate the case like the more dated factory option has. And the factory option was very attractive. Again, it's just a little bit dated, and that makes sense. It was about 20 years ago. So having this a little bit more timeless, a little more classic, and then ultimately a bit more ergonomic, it really does set off, of course, with the flows of the high polished with the satin brush. I just really dig the way that just comes together in a really beautiful way. So this double dome box sapphire does have an inner AR coating, and it's definitely doing its job, guys. It's tough, I would say, when it comes to photography or videography, especially because of how bright the lights are that you're going to be using to capture. But I will say, in just regular lighting conditions while it's on your wrist, absolutely the AR does the job. Now, this movement is the automatic Omega caliber 3303. Now, this is a chronometer grade movement, and it is chronometer certified, so by the COSC. Also, it has a 55-hour power reserve and beats at 4 hertz or 28,800 vibrations per hour beat rate. So, that's actually better than the brand new Moonwatch, the post 2021 Moonwatch, because that beats at 3 hertz. This is a full 4 hertz, also hacking, right, which they did add, thankfully, to the newer models. The newer Moonwatches do have a hacking feature finally. But yeah, that was really nice. And then here also, this has, like I mentioned, it has a vertical clutch, which means when you're running the chronograph, you can go ahead and just let it go, and it's not going to cause any additional wear and tear in terms of durability and long-term ownership issues. So you don't have to worry about any of that. You can let that run. You can let it run as the second hand because it is just going thanks to that vertical engagement. Also, it does have a column wheel actuator. So when I'm going to use the column wheel there, guys, it just means it's just going to be a lot more crisp in terms of that action versus a cam actuated chronograph. So it has those things that you look for, that you want on paper. And of course, yeah, again, this movement, and actually one nice little feature of this model is, since it's the 3303, it's actually the highly decorated model. Unfortunately, you can't see it on this model. The newer variations of this particular watch, where they switched it to they basically changed the dial to say 1957 in red text. Those variations do have a display case back, and you can see the additional decorations. But the earlier models, like let's say from the Michael Schumacher Legends watches that were automatics, that look really great. I mean, very Paul Newman Daytona-esque in terms of some of those colorways. Those were fantastic, but they had the variation of the movement that was less decorated. So it's kind of cool, even though you can't see it, knowing that you did get the higher grade of movement and decoration out of the options, I think is really cool and appropriate for this model, which I think stands out as, again, a beautiful balanced mashup of the original Speedmaster from 1957, as well as a lot of those traits that we come to know and love from the Professional, after, of course, all of the accolades that came with it being NASA's Moonwatch. So, getting into the dial, guys, let's soak it in. Check that out. Applied indices over a mild sunray black dial with color match date there at the 6 o'clock. So just beautifully integrated. You're getting 10 bar, yes, 100 meters of water resistance. So this is a legitimate everyday wearable watch. Unfortunately, the Moonwatch is still, I think about 50 meters, and some other Speedmasters are only 30 meters of water resistance, which isn't great. So this is very nice and definitely more confidence inspiring, even at its older age. The fact that it was made to have 10 bar or 100 meters water resistance means there's going to be a higher level of course, seals and everything that go into this. 20 millimeter lug width, very, very versatile, solid links, end links, 2 millimeter taper down to 18 millimeters at a 20 millimeter push button clasp with 2 position micro adjust, and that's manual micro adjust in a pin and collar construction, and that is for the OEM clasp and bracelet that I'm mentioning. But I did want to spit that out so that if any of you guys were wondering the specs on the OEM bracelet, in terms of this bracelet from Forstner, it's their contemporary flat link bracelet. It goes for $185, 20 millimeters. This is the post 2021 fitment, and it is polished and brushed, solid and articulated links. Guys, look at the articulation on these. Absolutely gorgeous. Screw pin construction, as you guys can see. So really beautifully done there. And then this nice milled actually, one thing to mention is the taper is fantastic. 4 millimeter taper down to 16 millimeters, and then you have this 18.5 millimeter push button milled clasp that is signed, and it does have 6 positions of manual micro adjust available, and it just helps complete that look there. This aesthetic is fantastic. The JB Forstner. It's a very nice kind of, again, modernization mashup, whatever you will, or reimagining. And I dig that. As much as I enjoy, a very one-to-one type of reissue, reimagining done right, like you're seeing here, really just speaks to me. So with that said, let's get this piece on the wrist and see how it wears. Okay, guys, as you can see on my 7.5-inch wrist, my goodness, I love the way this watch wears. Just buttery. My goodness. It has just enough bling there, right, to let you know there's something special on the wrist, but at the same time, it's very function forward and restrained layout, and very, again, function forward, meaningful. All of these little traits, all of the scales, all of the information and data being displayed is all very purposeful, and I love that. Of course, if I get my wrist a bit too close to the camera lens, you're going to get a bit of perspective distortion, and it's going to appear a lot larger on my wrist than it actually is. But I do want to make sure that you guys do get some detailed look. So what I'll do is keep my wrist nice and low, and then just tighten up the frame here so you guys can get still a detailed look, but just add a bit of a truer aspect ratio. Look at how that lays on my wrist. Now, although 7.5 inches is on the larger side of average, I will say that you can see here it is quite round, my wrist. It's not super flat and accommodating to just, the world's largest course, watches. So for me, this was definitely something where it just came in at that sweet spot. Absolutely. And then that bracelet, the way the flat link it just flows perfectly. Look at that. They were just made for each other, guys. The brushing, the polishing, it all just plays beautifully well. My goodness, look at that. And you can see just playing with the reflections there. This is a stunner. Has to be probably one of my best looking watches in my collection. You guys know I'm a really big Seiko collector, and I have some really rare Seikos. Getting into, of course, whether it be limited editions or just some really cool neo vintage references that are, more JDM specific in terms of them being for the Japanese market and not widely released. But a cool little tie back to that is that this watch, the Omega Speedmaster in general, of course, across all of the different variations, is actually the best selling watch in Japan. So the Japanese do love themselves a good Speedy. So it is kind of cool that, one of my, one of my more favorite Swiss watches also it has a bit of a soft spot there within the Japanese market. And my goodness. Whew, look at this thing. And again, this is not a unique case or anything like that. This is just that professional case there. That's Speedmaster Professional. We all know and love the Moonwatch. I mean, if you look at it from this angle, you probably would never even know that it is an automatic and that it is a broad arrow until you take a look there. And of course, you have the signature high polished tachymeter bezel, as well as the beautifully thick versus the quite thin hands on there, the broad arrow hands. And the great thing about broad arrows are that, that at one point they were a signature to Omega as the Mercedes hands are to Rolex to this day, right? Not every Rolex has, by the way, something to consider. Not every Rolex does have, Mercedes hands, but it's quite synonymous with the brand. And I think Omega at one point, this was the same for the broad arrow, but they've slowly, expanded their ranges so much. It's probably a little bit lesser known, but for me, it's a nice nod, of course, to their history, to that heritage. And another thing that's different about this dial is going to be they're running seconds. You can see there, it does have the sector setup. So it has the 4 different quadrants versus being more of the traditional kind of Speedy Professional layout. But yeah, I think, again, this is just a fantastic mashup, beautifully balanced, guys. I just feel very lucky to have been able to secure this beautiful example thanks to Belmont watches. I mean, they always say you're buying the seller, not necessarily the product. And in this case, thankfully, because I have a great relationship with them and they've been so supportive of the channel, I can absolutely trust them when they have inventory. If I'm interested in acquiring it, that I know that they did all of their due diligence in terms of making sure everything's good to go. And yeah, sometimes you find a great watch and it doesn't have box and papers. And it's in those situations, especially where you and your relationship with that dealer really, really comes in handy. And I mean, when it comes to any servicing work and everything, I always go through Belmont. So, big shout out to them again. And, of course, to Forstner. My gosh, this thing is this bracelet just remakes the watch. So loving that so much. But with that said, let's actually get it off the wrist, set up for some loom shots, the light transition, and closing thoughts. Okay, let's go ahead and hit the lights here. Hey, as you can see, guys, not a dive watch, not a Seamaster. It is a Speedmaster. So really small loom plops there. But again, the trade-off is you do have those beautiful applied indices that in the light, my goodness, they just go and flow, especially with the addition of those flat links, right? You're getting those nice bold surfaces with beautiful flat reflection. But one thing I always, of course, like to work in is a bit of a low light transition, because you're not always going to be out in the middle of a field enjoying direct sunlight. A lot of times you're going to find yourself coming in and out of buildings, walking underneath overhangs or just hanging out underneath the shade of a tree. So it is nice to see what these colors, textures, and finishes render like in less than optimal lighting. And as you guys can see, this is just gorgeous. I mean, the curves on this piece just juxtaposed against a lot of these flat corners and hard edges. It's just a beautiful blend of organic and at the same time, industrial design. This is and you can really see that dial come to life here. You can see, a lot more bold that, which I think is cool. That's it's a little bit restrained. Like you're not going to really see this this patterning on the dial until you get it in a very direct type of light situation, and then all of a sudden you're going to get all that visual play there. Oh, just fantastic, guys. I love this watch. And you know what? I'm one of those people that, I've been collecting watches for a long time. I have a lot of watches. I've experienced a lot of ones, and high-end ones, low-end ones, and everything in between. And, this was that one that was just a sweet spot for me. It's not to say that I still don't have a Moonwatch, a Speedy Professional on my wish list for some point. But I will say this is kind of, for me, I mean, this is what enables me to even put that on there, because this right here speaks to me individually, and it feels very signature to my aesthetic and what I love and what I look for when I'm collecting personally, versus what feels a little bit more like a bit of an obvious choice when it comes to the Moonwatch, right? So closing thoughts, guys. On the wrist famously wears smaller thanks to that asymmetrical case with integrated crown guards. In terms of model variants, there are a ton of speedy variations, but this one hit a real sweet spot for my personal taste. As I mentioned, comparable models, seemingly endless modern and vintage references to choose from, guys. So it's tough to compare different models at this point. But for me, guys, if I get into the bottom line, as much as I love the Moonwatch, the older, more affordable variations did lack water resistance, hacking seconds, and tighter timing tolerances in terms of those movements. Then, although the newer releases resolved many of those issues, it still drove prices, quite high, right? In terms of the increase in how much Sapphire Sandwich Moonwatch is these days, at least for full price. It's much higher, right? And they still only beat at 3 hertz and only have 50 meters of water resistance, which should be more than enough. But again, it's nice to have double that. So for me, this rather obscure neo-vintage broad arrow automatic ended up, being kind of perfect for me, as it added, value while retaining more iconic, kind of that iconic professional scale, which is tough now in the modern watches. You pretty much, if you want that Speedmaster professional silhouette, you kind of have to have that. Here, there was a window where you could get that watch, but you could have it in a way that didn't feel like it was too gimmicky. It was just, a nice, restrained, and really universally recognizable as a Speedmaster, without them worrying about it kind of cutting into that market. So yeah, a big shout out again to Belmont watches, also to Forstner straps. I'll leave links to both of those down in the description, guys. But with that said, let me know what you all think down in the comments below. If you like the video, please do a like, and if you haven't already, please subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.